and good evening, and welcome to the first ever Domestic Estate Manager Association's Town Hall meeting. My name is Matthew Hack, and I am the president of the Domestic Estate Managers Association. Before we begin tonight's event, I'd like to take a few minutes and thank all of our sponsors who were able to make this evening's event possible. The first company would be the Baltus Collection for hosting our event. We would also like to thank Precise Home Management, Stonemark Construction Management, and DSI Entertainment Systems. We'd also like to thank our florist, Petals by David, for providing the beautiful arrangements of flowers that you will see set up throughout the showroom this evening. We'd also like to give special thanks to our local board of directors. Ms. Adrienne Hampton, Chapter President, Judd Masters, Vice President, Jacqueline Wolf, Secretary, and Mr. John Alfano, Programs Chair. Before we get started with this evening's event, I would also like to take a few minutes to explain what is DEMA. The Domestic Estate Managers Association is first and foremost an educational association dedicated to providing safety and protection for principal homeowners and their estates. We accomplish this by providing and continuing educational and resources for private service professionals so that they can enjoy greater job security and have more fruitful careers. DEMA focuses on creating different programs, resources, and tools to make daily tasks easier to accomplish for the private service professional. Some of the programs that we provide are an educated network of service providers, our vendors, educational webinars, networking events to exchange best practices, article and video libraries on our website, a trusted directory of schools and domestic placement agencies, demographic surveys, a national insurance program, relocation and transitional programs for private service professionals, a membership perks program, and last but not least, a monthly educational newsletter. We were recently asked what the purpose of this evening's event was. And to be very honest, the main reason is to be able to provide a platform for our members and the industry to have a candid discussion about domestic placement, the current state and future of the industry, and the challenges that exist today. We hope to provide more insight on these topics to create better communication between everyone related to our industry. And with that being said, now, as they say, the show must go on. We hope you enjoy the first ever Domestic Estate Managers Association Town Hall meeting.
It's a great honor, excitement, and pleasure to be here this evening. Having been a working butler, having been a household manager, and now, in the industry, I'm, definitely getting close to 30 years, which is starting to add up. But I thought, having the only butler and household management school that's registered in North America, I actually thought that I would start a little bit from the education side. So I think that there's something very interesting that a lot of people don't know about the industry. And that is, how did we all get to be in this business where we are today from the past? And so let's take a little, walk down memory lane, and let's go back to the Victorian era. So we're in the Victorian era, we're in the United Kingdom, 70% of the population of Britain was in private service during the Victorian era. Think about that. 70% of the entire country worked in the domestic industry. So they're working the domestic industry. The Victorian era is doing wonderful. Ultimately, unfortunately, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, or Queen Victoria, she passes on. We go into the Edwardian era, and private service is absolutely at the height. Now, all of a sudden, as the Edwardian era comes, we go through the Second Industrial Revolution, and all of a sudden, people are starting to leave the estates and to go to the city. They want to work in factories. It's perceived leaving private service is actually going to increase their status in life by going to the city. And so we get to World War I, 1914, and all of a sudden we really start to see that the men on the estates are all called to war. Off they go and continue on, and private service and the demand for private service starts to really decrease because the factories and the production, the demand in the cities is increasing so drastically, and the money is actually better to go in the cities. So we carry on, we go through the Second World War, we finally get to the 1960s. Free love, everyone's having a great time, and private service is at the lowest in the history of the world. There are less people in 1960 that are working in private service than at any other time. We get into the 70s, the comment about good health is hard to find makes total sense, because nobody goes into private service, nobody's transitioning, it's really perceived as a low-level occupation. All of a sudden we have Ronald Reagan, who was elected President of the United States. We have Margaret Thatcher, who is President of the United Kingdom. We start to have money in large amounts that's being made. Money, as we go into the 80s, is being made at a faster rate than it has ever made before. And all of a sudden we hit the end of the 1980s, we're now into the 1990s, and we have more millionaires and more billionaires than we've ever had in the history of the world. So what does this do? Well, millionaires, billionaires, who now have acquired this new money, want to start living like millionaires and billionaires. So what do? They buy houses, they buy planes, they buy all the toys. And they start to live their life, and all of a sudden, the lady of the house turns to her husband and said, wait a second, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to run all these homes. I don't want to coordinate your plane. I don't want to deal with the housekeeping staff. I don't want to do this. So now we're in the 1990s, and private service is back with a vengeance. The demand for private service is increasing at a dramatic rate. The problem is, no one has been trained to go in the industry for almost 80 years. And remember, it's been since 1914. So now, we're in the 90s, there's a huge demand for private service, but there's no one who's trained. Employers are not trained, the staff is not trained. So, agencies pop up, and people decide, oh, this sounds like a good career. And employers have so much money that they are prepared to pay any price for staff, and salaries start to go through the roof. We go through the 1990s, we now get into the new millennium, and all of a sudden we hit the recession. And what does that do? The recession allows for those people who didn't have real money to actually have to let their staff go. Staff goes, they aren't necessarily replacing their staff. But what we forget is that employers who were new money at the beginning, the late 1980s, early 1900s, are now 20 years into having money. Which means that they are now at a level that they're now starting to become educated. And they start to know what staff should be doing and how households should be run more today than they ever have. Now, it doesn't mean that they're right, but they now have more of an opinion than they've ever had. Which means we have to deal with those opinions. So what has the recession done for us? The recession has weeded out those who are the weakest links, and the strongest links are surviving. So we're going to get into that, I think, a little bit with Japan. I don't want to go too far So that's kind of, I think, just a very interesting thing that people really don't understand how we really got to where we are today. I think that it's an interesting cycle. I think it's very interesting when you actually plot it on the graph, which we do in the first day of household management in Butler School. And the other thing that I just wanted to say very briefly before I finish is, what are employers thinking today? Employers today are thinking of two things: value for money, and the employers are becoming more sophisticated, and they're expecting employees to become more sophisticated in order to meet their needs. And that's the challenge of the industry.